HMAS Tobruk was a landing ship heavy of the Royal Australian Navy, based on the design of the Round Table class of the British Royal Fleet Auxiliary. Planning for the ship began in the 1970s to provide the Australian Army with a permanent sealift capability. She was laid down by Carrington Slipways in 1979, launched in 1980, and commissioned in 1981. She was a multi-purpose, roll-on, roll-off heavy-lift ship capable of transporting soldiers, APCs, and tanks, and delivering them to shore via landing craft directly by beaching. The ship experienced problems during her early career with her engines and sewerage system. During the 1980s, the ship delivered supplies to the multinational force and observers on the Sinai Peninsula, assisted in the withdrawal from RAF Base Butterworth, provided support and accommodation for delegates to the South Pacific Forum, and was part of the Australian response to the 1987 Fijian coups d'etat. In the early 1990s, Tobruk was part of ceremonies marking the 75th anniversary of the landing at Anzac Cove, then after a refit, participated in peacekeeping efforts in Somalia. Plans to replace Tobruk with one of the Canimbla-class ships began in 1993. She was offered for sale to the Royal New Zealand Navy, who refused because of the ship's manpower requirements. Delays in converting the Canimblas for service meant Tobruk continued with normal operations during the 1990s. Attempts to sell the ship to the British and the Portuguese did not succeed, and in 1997 the decision was made to keep Tobruk, as the Canimblas could not completely replace the heavy lift capability provided. During this period, Tobruk was deployed to Bougainville on several occasions as peacekeeping operations during the Bougainville Civil War. At the end of the decade, Tobruk operated as part of the INTERFET peacekeeping operation in East Timor. In 2000 and 2001, Tobruk was sent to the Solomon Islands on several deployments in response to the Civil War, first to evacuate Australian citizens, then as a neutral venue for peace talks. From late 2001 to early 2002, the ship was in northern Australian waters on border protection duties as part of Operation Relax. During 2005 and early 2006, Tobruk sailed to the Middle East on several occasions to deliver vehicles and cargo to Australian forces in the region. Tobruk and the two Canimblas were sent to East Timor in mid-2006 in response to the 2006 East Timorese crisis, forming the first RAN amphibious readiness group since World War II. The rest of the decade included further border protection deployments under Operation Resolute, a visit to Hawaii for the RIMPAC multinational naval exercise, support for the Army Aboriginal Community Assistance Program, relief operations following the 2009 Samoa earthquake and tsunami, and used as the venue for a Fall-Out Boy concert. After spending several months in 2010 undergoing extended maintenance, Tobruk participated in the United States Navy's Pacific Partnership Humanitarian Assistance deployment. Because of the need for propeller shaft repairs, Tobruk could not be part of the military response to Cyclone Yasi. Heavy use and lack of maintenance in previous years began to take its toll, with Tobruk unavailable for service on several occasions during the early 2010s, as the two Canimblas had been forced out of service by ongoing issues. The Australian government had to charter a succession of civilian ships to provide standby heavy transport capability. In 2013, Tobruk again participated in Pacific Partnership, followed by a visit to the Philippines with disaster relief supplies after Typhoon Haiyan. In early 2015, the ship was part of the response to Cyclone Pam's impact on Vanuatu. Tobruk was decommissioned in July 2015, with calls for the ship to be scuttled as a dive wreck. design and construction. In the late 1970s, it was decided that the Australian Army needed to be provided with a long-term sealift capability, preferably through the acquisition of a dedicated cargo ship. The chartering of civilian ships to provide this capability when required, as had been done with the merchant vessels Chaparat and Booneroo during the Vietnam War, was considered and rejected. Because Australian National Line was unable to provide the necessary level of support, it was decided that a purpose-built ship would be constructed for the role, and would be operated by the RAN. While the Army did not require that the ship be capable of beaching, the RAN set this as a requirement to maximize the ship's flexibility. In 1975, the Navy successfully convinced Australian military's Force Structure Committee to endorse this requirement over the Army's opposition, and the committee authorized the purchase of a landing ship heavy on 19 March 1975. Two designs were considered for Tobruk, with a modified Round Table class landing ship logistics, in use with the Royal Fleet Auxiliary at the time, selected for construction. Tobruk's design was based on RFA Hpeterswald, the second of the class, which had been modified following the Royal Fleet Auxiliary's experience with operating the class's lead ship, RFA Lancelot. The ship is designed as a multi-purpose, roll-on, roll-off heavy lift and transport vessel. The Australian modifications to the design were kept to a minimum to simplify construction. The most significant changes were to improve the ship's ability to operate both large and multiple helicopters, fitting an operations room, and adding a derrick with a lift of 70 tons. Most of the other changes related to bringing accommodation conditions into line with Australian requirements. Like the other ships of the Round Table class, Tobruk was built to commercial rather than military standards, and is unable to sustain as much damage as warships. The ship has a standard displacement of 3,353 tons, and a full load displacement of 5,791 tons. She is 127 meters in length, with a beam of 18.3 meters, and a draft of 4.9 meters. Propulsion machinery consists of two Merley's Blackstone KDMR-8 diesels, which provide 9,600 horsepower to the ship's two propeller shafts. The ship was fitted with different engines to those used in the equivalent British ships, which were proven unreliable early in Tobruk's career. Top speed is 18 knots, with a range of 8,000 nautical miles at 15 knots. A 400 horsepower bow thruster is also fitted to assist with confined waters maneuvering. Armament initially consisted of two 40/60th Bofors guns, supplemented by two 12.7 mm machine guns. During the 1990s, the Bofors were removed. They were later replaced by two Mini Typhoon 12.7 mm mounts, which were not permanently installed but fitted as needed, and the number of standard 12.7 mm machine guns was increased to 6. The sensor suite includes a Kelvin Hughes Type 1006 surface search radar and a Kelvin Hughes Type 1007 navigational radar. In 2012, the ship's company was 148, including 13 officers. Tobruk is capable of embarking between 300 and 520 soldiers, along with 1,300 tons of cargo, 330 lane meters of vehicles. Vehicles and cargo can be embarked via bow stern ramps, with the reinforced tank deck running the length of the ship, and interdeck transfer ramps fitted. The bow ramp is contained contained behind horizontal opening bow doors, and can be extended and lowered for beach or harbor loading, while at the stern a combined oar ramp can be used conventionally when at suitable facilities, or for ramp-to-ramp loading of landing craft at sea. Additional cargo handling is provided by the 70-ton Vel heavy lift derrick, supplemented by two 8.5-TONNE Favco cranes. Two LCM-8 landing craft can be carried in cradles on the main deck, while two LCVP are carried in derricks on the superstructure. Two naval lighter-age equipment pontoons can be carried on the ship's flanks to extend the reach of the bow ramp when beaching, or as rafts to transport cargo ashore. The ship has an aft helicopter platform capable of handling aircraft up to Sea King size, while the main deck can be used as a secondary flight deck for helicopters up to Chinook size. Both flight decks can be operated simultaneously, and both have capability for landed or at hover refueling. Tobruk was built by Carrington Slipways, Tobruk, New South Wales. The company was selected following a competitive tender in May 1977, with contract negotiations completed on 3 November 1977. Construction of Tobruk formally began on 7 February 1978, when the ship's keel was laid. Tobruk was launched on 1 March 1980 by Lady Anna Cowan, wife of Governor-General Zelman Cowan. The ship left the dockyard for the first time in December 1980. Her construction had been delayed by over 4 months by industrial disputes, and her final cost of $59 million was 42% greater than originally estimated. The ship's sea trials were conducted in early 1981 off Newcastle and Port Stephens by a joint Navy-Army civilian crew, and fitting out was completed on 7 April 1981. Tobruk was handed over to the Navy on the 11th of April 1981 and was commissioned at Newcastle on the 23rd of April. The ship's name had been selected in 1976 and refers to the Siege of Tobruk during World War II, in which the RAN's scrap iron flotilla supplied the besieged 9th Australian Division. She is the second RAN ship of this name, preceded by the battle-class destroyer HMAS Tobruk. She is the first purpose-built amphibious vessel in RAN service, and is classified as a landing ship heavy by the RAN.